Hi there, my name is Jack Wallen, and I'm here to talk to you about something that I think some of you will consider important. Maybe not, who knows? Only the shadow knows. Moo-ha-ha. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you exactly how old I am because, the internet. But I am very, very, very close to 60 years old. And a lot of people, when they see me, they're like, well, what's your secret? Blah, blah, blah. And my answer to that is usually, well, good genes. But I don't wear jeans, so that's a bad joke. So I want to talk about aging and about how aging doesn't have to suck. Because the truth is that so many people look at aging as something to fear. And from my experience, aging isn't really all that bad. Not at all. It's got its downfalls, don't get me wrong. But I'm going to let you in on a few of my secrets that keep aging from sucking the soul away from me. Now, there are certain things that I'm not going to talk about because it would be pointless to try. One of them is finances. Number one, I don't speak of fluent money. I never have, just like I don't speak of fluent business. And the other thing is that when you live in a country like America and you have a government like we have right now that just doesn't give a shit about the aging population, well, it's a topic that's kind of touchy. And I know people, very good people, that are afraid of how they're going to survive when they get older financially. And I worry about that. I worry about that all the time. I'm a writer. I don't have a pension or anything like that. I just have to keep writing, and I have to just keep writing more and more and more and more. That's just the way it is. So finances is not going to be a part of this conversation. So if you were hoping to come here and read about how to not be broke when you're old, go somewhere else, because I don't really have any advice for that. I know people that do have advice for that, but not me. So I tend to break down the art of aging into three categories: physical, mental, and emotional. First, I'm going to talk about the physical aspect of it. Now, I'm a very active person. I've been running for a long time. Before I ran, I raced bicycles, mountain bikes mostly. And I would frequently ride centuries, which is 100 miles. I've run marathons. And I still, to this day, I exercise 6 days a week. Now, I've had to pull back. I haven't done a marathon in a couple of years now because the training, it wasn't the marathon. The marathons themselves was actually kind of easy. It was the training that broke me. And the older I got, the harder it was to recover from the training process of preparing for a marathon. And so I've pulled back, and it wasn't because of my heart or my lungs. It was my Achilles and my heels that they still give me problems to this day. And to avoid that kind of absolute catastrophe with my ankles, I stretch a lot. I drink a lot of water. I baby my legs. And I'm not obsessed with it, but I became fairly adamant about staying active because of my father. I loved my father. My father was a wonderful human being, which I've said over and over again. But one thing I noticed is that when I don't remember what age it was, but at some point in his elder stages, he got the gout. You can't say gout without the. I don't know why. It just doesn't sound right. And it wasn't too bad, but he let it get to him. And what happened was he became very sedentary. And the second he became sedentary, his health declined very quickly. He gained a lot of weight, and he just wasn't the same person anymore. And after he became sedentary and started developing other issues, it was just a big domino, and he couldn't stop it. The doctors couldn't stop it, and he wound up on. And the crazy thing is he would start a medication. A doctor would start him on a medication, and he had side effects, and the doctor would give him another medication to counter the side effects, and then he would have to be given another medication to counter the side effects from the medication that stopped side effects from the original medication. It went on and on and on until he was taking so many medications that it was a puzzle that no one could figure out anymore. There was actually, I recently watched an episode of The Resident that dealt with that, and it was like, oh wow, I know this all too well. And it's another reason why when my doctor says, I want you to put you on a medication, I'm like, whoa, hold on. What are the side effects of this medication? What will it do to me? I know you say that it will help me, but how will it hurt me? And I was recently put on a statin, and the statin wrecked me. And I went to my doctor. I said, there's got to be a different way. I can't do this. I cannot function with this statin. My heart races constantly. I don't feel myself. So I looked into it. I said, okay, I'm going to try a vegan fish oil substitute. I am vegan, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And so I've been taking that. I feel much better. And, you know, I take other supplements, but I'm very cautious about medication because of what happened to my father. Now, about my diet, for pretty much all of my adult life, I've been a vegetarian. And about 10 years ago, I decided to go vegan and cut caffeine out of my diet. And ever since then, I mean, it was a night and day difference in my body. And after the first 2 weeks, because when you cut off caffeine, you're going to have a headache for about 2 weeks, and it was bad. But I held true. I didn't cave, and I got through it. And I stopped craving sugar, which was great. And I didn't feel like, with the amount of caffeine that I was taking, I was constantly hyper. And I hated that feeling. And so that went away. And I believe very strongly in my diet, in a vegetarian or vegan diet. I'm not saying you have to go vegan, but vegetarian diet is very, very good for you. And there's a book, there are a couple books, like How Not to Die, and then I think it's called the China Experiment, or the Chinese Diet. I can't remember what it's called, but it talks about how the effects of a non-meat diet have on you. Now, I'm not militant about this. I'm not going to say, you know, you should do this. That's up to you. Whatever gets you through the end of the day, great. And I'm not going to sit here and go, yeah, you should be vegan, you should be vegetarian. It's personal. I'm saying for me, that change in my diet made a world of good, made a world of difference. I made a lot of good, but world of difference. And so staying active, eating the right foods, drinking a lot of water. Most people do not drink enough water. It's as simple as that. Drink more water. Please drink more water. Did you hear me? Drink more water. Okay. The physical side is great. And the problem with the physical side is you're not just fighting your bad habits. You're also fighting DNA. And you can't win the battle against DNA. It's going to win. But you can at least give yourself a fighting chance against DNA by developing good habits. But I believe, I'm not discounting the physical side of this, because the physical side of aging is very important. Exercise is key, absolutely. But there's one aspect of aging that I believe a lot of people overlook. And it is, I think, the part of aging that really causes it to suck. And I'm talking about the mental side of it. If you were to ask me how old I am physically, I would tell you I'm almost 60 years old. If you were to ask me how old I am mentally, I would say 20s or 30s, maybe. Something like that. There's an old adage that you're only as old as you feel. I think that's what the adage is. But I'm going to take this a step further. And I'm going to say, you're only as old as you think you are. If I were to all of a sudden start thinking, you're almost 60 years old, face it, nothing you can do about it, you're almost 60, that's that, I would probably start aging a little faster. But because I have a tendency to think younger, I feel younger. I believe that the concept of aging is a trap in and of itself, because it causes us to think older thoughts. Right? Right? You stop daydreaming, and you stop. When you're younger, your mind races around a world of possibilities. I remember when I was in my 20s, I had forever. And I had the possibility of endlessness before me. And because I thought that way and felt that way, my mind was, it was like a playground. And I constantly thought I had young thoughts in my head. And I had joy in my mind, because there was so much ahead of me. But as you get older, you start seeing that event horizon that you're eventually going to cross. And you start thinking mortality is the only thing. You can't get it out of your head. All of a sudden you're like, I'm almost 60 years old. I'm going to die soon. I might have, 20 good years left of my life. What can I do in 20 years? There's a better way to look at it. What can't you do in 20 years? 20 years is nothing to sneeze at. That's a long time. And you can do a whole lot in 20 years. But even more importantly, as you get older, stop thinking old thoughts. That's not to say you shouldn't be responsible about aging. Of course you should. You should have a will. You should have all of the things that are associated with getting older, but don't allow your mind to get caught in that sucking void of old thoughts. It's great. It's one thing. It's like, oh, heating pad, you're my best friend. What would I do without you? But don't allow yourself to get to the point where you become mentally dependent on that thing. I know that might not make a lot of sense to anybody, but if you've come to use a heating pad in your life, you know how good it can be. But it's just a small little thing Just like, just like you all of a sudden get caught in these routines that are centered around old age. It's like, oh, I'm getting old. I guess I better get Velcro shoes. Maybe a walker is in my future. Don't think those things. I know you as you get old, I'm experiencing this. Going up and down stairs isn't as easy as it used to be. It is when I wake up in the morning and I go down the stairs for the first time, it's like, oh, I've got to hold on to the handrail to get downstairs because of my knees and my ankles and all that. But then after the first time, it's like, oh, I can get up and down, bound up and down them all I want. So I just allow myself that little bit of grace. You got to warm up. You just got to warm up. And I look at that, instead of looking at that in terms of getting old, I look at that in terms of, well, if I were going out for a run, I would have to warm up. I would have to stretch. So why can't I just apply that to everyday physical routines? And in doing that, my brain doesn't go, oh, yeah, this is a product of you getting old. It's more, oh, this is a product of you being active. And that, in thinking that, makes so much difference, because you don't allow yourself to get caught in that trap of aging before you're old. Once upon a time, decades ago, being almost 60 was a miracle. But that's not the case anymore, because we know better. So we can live into our 90s or our hundreds, and we don't have to do so getting old in our mind. It is so helpful to think young thoughts. Allow your mind to just kind of spiral out into these realm of daydreams that help you to think and feel young. Right? You don't have to daydream about the effects of getting old. You don't have to daydream about a walker or you know, oh gosh, at some point, what's it going to be like when I have one of those little lifts that carry me up the stairs? You don't have to think those things. I mean, maybe eventually that's going to happen, but don't sell yourself short. Don't assume, oh, my knee's aching. My knee's aching. What am I going to do? Your knee's aching. Okay. Take care of it. Take care of it, but don't let it drag you down. Now, of course, there are situations where, oh, you might have a torn meniscus or something where, yeah, you've got to really protect it. But if you're healthy, don't allow thoughts of being unhealthy take charge of you. Now, we've covered the physical and the mental, but now let's talk about the emotional, because emotional is also really, really important. I've talked about this before, but at one point in my life, about 15 or so years ago, I can't remember exactly when it was, I had to take a regular job. And it was a cubicle job. And it was terrible. It was awful. It was probably the worst 6 years of my life. And all of a sudden, what I noticed was I was going home angry all the time. My hair started turning gray. And I never had to worry about gray hair. But there it was. And I didn't know what to do. And I literally felt myself aging faster than necessary. I think in those 6 years, I aged 20. And I finally realized that. And I made a concerted effort to change it. And that's when I kind of finagled my way into being able to be a full-time writer. And literally 24 hours after I did that, my quality of life skyrocketed. all the stress was gone. And I cannot begin to tell you how important it is to leave stress behind. Stress is, I believe, one of the key factors in premature aging. I know people who are a decade younger than me who work in big businesses with stressful jobs, and they look, feel, think, and act exponentially older than me. And it's all because of the stress induced by their job. I firmly believe this. I think that one of the biggest factors in premature aging is our jobs. And that is tragic. And part of the problem is, and I know this is part of the problem, I know for a fact this is part of the problem. So many people get locked into jobs they hate because of insurance. If we had universal health care in this country, there would be fewer people in that situation. Not only would there be people, considerably more people happy, there would also be more people willing to take a chance, starting their own businesses, creating things that weren't created before, inventing things. Our country would be so much better if we had universal health care. I believe that with 100% of my mind and my heart and my soul, and no one will ever be able to change my mind about that. And the thing is, as I mentioned earlier, how the government doesn't give a shit about us as we age. Those jobs you have, the job you have, they don't care. They don't care about you. They don't care about your health or your quality of life. They only care that you're productive, that you make them money. And the stress of that job is aging you. It is. Think about it. You're gone from home, what? Let's say you work 8 hours a day. I have a dear friend who works 8 hours a day. But to get to that job is an hour commute. One way. So he's gone 10 hours a day. Now, let's do some math here. If he sleeps 8 hours a day, that's 16 hours gone total. That leaves 8 hours a day for himself. Now, you can start doing other math there, like maybe a 20-minute shower, maybe 20 minutes for each 3 meals. There's an hour, so there's an hour 20 minutes gone from that 8 hours. And you could just start adding everything up. And maybe if you're lucky, by the end of all that calculation, you got 5 hours of free time a day. That's 5 hours to give to yourself, your family, your friends, your hobbies. It's not enough. Oh, and let's not forget this. There's also the decompression when you get home from work. I've had those jobs where when I come home from work, it took me 30 minutes to 60 minutes, depending on how much stress it was involved in that day, to decompress, to unwind from work. When my wife comes home from a full day of doing clients at her salon, she needs about an hour before she's okay to have interaction with me. And that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't have to live like that. And that ages you. Because what happens is, you all of a sudden, you've dedicated so much time to your job, so much time to sleeping, so much time to other things, that you have little time to do what you need to do, because you have to do laundry, you have to cook food, you have to clean the house, you've got to do all these other things. So when you factor all that in, all of a sudden the stress level is like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to get everything done I need to do. So what happens is you use that time that you would have used to decompress and just relax, to do all the things you need to do the chores, do the shopping, do all that stuff. Then what do you have left? Not a whole lot, my friends, not a whole lot. But what can you do? That's a big part of the problem. It's not like because we're all well, not me. I don't even have insurance. I haven't had insurance for a decade. But most people are all locked into their jobs because of their insurance. And they know that if they leave their jobs, they're probably going to lose their insurance. And if they lose their insurance, who knows what could happen? Because this is a country where you are just an accident away from bankruptcy without insurance. And some people with insurance, that's the case, because the insurance in this country is so freaking bad. So there's all of these stressors in life. And a lot of times, a lot of instances, because we don't have enough time to deal with things, those stressors get compounded. So by the end of the week, you get to the weekend, you're like, all I can think of doing is just relaxing, resting, so I can charge up to do it all again. And there's not. I got lucky. I got so lucky. I mean, I know that when I graduated from high school, I knew that my life was going to be about art in some way, shape, or form. And I got very lucky that I could just be belligerent, not belligerent, but I could just be determined, doggedly determined to make that happen. And I worked so hard to do so. And because of that, I was able to kind of fall into this life that I have now. So I don't have those stressors that a lot of people have. And it helps me tremendously to look, think, and feel young. And I hate that there are so many people out there that cannot unstick themselves from their jobs. And so what I would say to you, if that is you, you've got to find a way to make everything efficient, so that you can decompress on the drive home, and make sure that you throughout the week you do the things you need to do, so that you don't come home on Monday from work and you had not done anything last week for cleaning and food and all that. So all of a sudden you had this giant pile of crap that you have to get done. And every time you don't do something, it just adds to the pile. You've got to treat yourself well. You've got to live in such a way that things don't compound like that. And I know I'm so lucky, and I'm so grateful. Every day I wake up feeling grateful for the fact that I have been able to build this career in life that I have. But it's also helped me to look back on my life and go, well, what was going wrong? What caused me to feel older than I was? And it took me a long time to go, well, it's all about the physical, the mental, and the emotional. How do I make sure that all three of those things are working in my favor? And every situation is different. Every one. And so I would say to you that kind of step back from your life and take an inventory of what component of that trilogy you're suffering from. Is it mental, is it emotional, or is it physical? And if you figure out which one is causing the problems, then what do you do to better it? Is it, oh, I just need to start exercising, that would help me a lot. Or, oh, maybe I need to change my diet. Yeah, that'll help me a lot. Or maybe I need to figure out how I need to organize my life such that I have time to give to myself. And it's not easy. But every day that you don't do this, that you don't take the time to do this, it's going to get harder and harder and harder. So especially if you're young, if you're in your 40s or 30s or 40s, start thinking about these sorts of things. Start taking care of yourself physically. Start taking care of yourself mentally. Start taking care of yourself emotionally. Do these things so you don't have to walk into aging afraid. I don't fear age anymore. I know what's happening. I can see it. I can look at myself in the mirror and go, yeah, you got age. You've aged. But I embrace it now. And I'm like, I've aged. And look what I've got to show for it. I've written almost 70 books. I've acted in hundreds of shows. I've done good things, helped people. I have a good marriage. And I have a home. And I just look back on those things and I'm like, what helped me to get here? What helped me to not age poorly? Aging doesn't have to suck. It really doesn't. Think young, feel young, act young, and you will be shocked at how it can positively impact your life. I'm not saying it's a miracle cure, but I'm saying it can't hurt. Thank you so very much for giving me a little bit of time today. I hope that maybe I've given you food for thought, and that maybe something that I have said will light that little light bulb above your head, and you go, oh, aha, I just had an epiphany. Because, ultimately, that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to help. And it doesn't mean I'm spoon feeding you things. I'm telling you things so that you might go, okay, I think I can figure something out here based on what he said. Right? Anyway, thank you again. I know your time is precious, and you just spent 20 or so minutes listening to me, and now you're like, oh my gosh, now I've got to cook dinner. Anyway, thank you so much, and I hope that you and everyone you know and love have a wonderful, wonderful day.